They say you can tell a lot about a person by how they deliver bad news. Some people cry. Some people shout. Some people pace the room and run their hands through their hair like the words are too heavy to hold still. Brittany did none of those things. She turned off the blender, set down her glass of green something or other, and looked at me with the calm, practiced expression of a woman who had rehearsed this conversation at least a dozen times in the mirror. Maybe more. Dorothy, Darnell, and I have been talking. She paused just long enough to let that we land. We think this might be a good time to make some adjustments. I was sitting at the kitchen table, Roosevelt's table, the one he built from white oak in the summer of 1988, sanding it smooth over 3 weekends while I stood in the yard watching and pretending not to watch. I had a cup of coffee in my hand. My Bible was open to Psalms. The morning light was doing what it always did at that hour, coming through the east window at exactly the right angle, turning everything it touched to gold. I set my cup down slowly. Darnell came in from the hallway, jacket half on, phone already in hand. He sat across from me, not beside me, across, and he had the look of a man who had agreed to be present for something unpleasant but had not agreed to enjoy it. Mom, he cleared his throat. This house, we've been thinking about what to do with it. We want to expand the main floor, maybe add a home office, open up the back, make it work better for us. Another pause. And honestly, you'd probably be more comfortable somewhere designed for people in your stage of life. Stage of life. I turned the phrase over in my mind like a stone. You're talking about a senior community, I said, said. Brittany's voice picked up speed. The way people talk when they're trying to get past the hard part before you can interrupt. Not a nursing home, Dorothy. Not at all. We're talking about Fairview Estates. It's beautiful. They have a pool, a garden club, organized activities. I taught 800 children how to read over 32 years, I said. I don't need anyone to organize activities for me. She blinked. Darnell looked at the table. The kitchen went quiet except for the refrigerator hum and the sound of a neighbor's dog somewhere down the street. I picked up my coffee, took a sip. Let the silence do what silence does when you've been a school teacher long enough to know its power. That night I lay in bed in the dark and thought about the conversation I'd heard the night before. I hadn't meant to hear it. I'd gotten up for water around 11 and their bedroom door was open just a crack. The kind of crack that seems accidental but never quite is in an old house that knows how to breathe. She'll just go along with it, Darnell had said. You know how she is. She never pushes back. And Brittany, quieter. That's why we waited until now. I stood in the dark hallway with my glass of water, and I heard every word. Then I went back to bed, stared at the ceiling, and did not sleep. But I did not cry either. The first time Roosevelt and I saw this land, it was nothing but scrub grass, red clay, and the rusted skeleton of an old fence that had given up on itself years before we arrived. It was 1981. We were 34 years old. We had saved for 6 years, every spare dollar from his electrician's wages and my teacher's salary, every birthday check, every overtime hour, and we had just enough for the down payment on a piece of land that nobody else seemed to want. There was a reason nobody else wanted it. When we moved in, well before the house was finished, sleeping on a mattress on the floor of what would become the living room, not one neighbor came to say hello. Not one. Curtains moved. Porch lights clicked off as we pulled into the driveway. A woman 2 doors down crossed the street rather than walk past our property. Roosevelt watched all of this without a word. Then one evening, he sat down on the front steps with a glass of sweet tea and said, "May, we're not building this house for them to look at. We're building it to live in." There's a difference. I sat down next to him. I know. So let's build it right. And we did. Lord, we did. Roosevelt did the framing and the electrical himself. I mixed mortar and laid tile in the kitchen. The blue and white tiles I had picked out of a catalog, each one slightly uneven because they were set by human hands, not machines. I laid the last one 7 months pregnant with Darnell. Roosevelt held the bucket and didn't say a word about it, just handed me what I needed and kept handing it. We borrowed tools from the men in our church congregation. We traded labor. Roosevelt wired 3 kitchens and 2 garages in exchange for plumbing help, roofing help, drywall help. On Saturday nights, I cooked for whoever had worked that week. Big pans of cornbread, pots of red beans, sweet potato pie. The house rose up out of that clay soil the way things rise when people put everything they have into them. Darnell was born 2 years after we broke ground. His first crib sat in the unfinished hallway because the nursery wasn't done yet, and he fell asleep every night to the sound of Roosevelt sanding, hammering, building. I don't think he remembers any of that. Or maybe he does, and it's easier not to. We paid off the mortgage in 2009, 1 year before Roosevelt got sick. He signed the final paperwork at the kitchen table, the same oak table he had built by hand, and he held the paid-in-full notice up in the light and said, "Nobody can touch this now, May. This is yours." 6 months later, he was in a hospital bed signing different papers. His hand shook, but his signature was clear. The house went into my name alone. Every document, every deed, every record. Roosevelt had made sure of that years before anyone knew he was sick. He had always been this kind of man who thought 3 steps ahead and never made a fuss about it. The morning after Brittany's announcement, I waited until they had both left, Darnell to his office, Brittany to wherever Brittany goes in the middle of a Tuesday, and then I went to the storage room at the end of the hall. Brittany called it that cluttered corner. She had mentioned twice that she wanted to turn it into a walk-in closet extension. I had nodded both times and done nothing about it. I pulled an old cardboard box from the back shelf. Inside it were 4 composition notebooks, the kind with the black and white marbled covers. Roosevelt's handwriting on each spine, neat and precise. Household, 1998 to 2002. Household in 2003 to 2007. Household, 2008 to 2012. Miscellaneous. Keep. I sat down on the storage room floor with my back against the wall, the way I used to sit with Darnell when he was small and upset about something and needed to be close to the ground for a while. I opened the first notebook. Roosevelt had kept records of everything. Not in a cold, transactional way. He was never cold. But he was careful. The way men are careful when they have come from nothing and know exactly what nothing feels like and never want to go back. Every page was dated, every entry clear. March 1998. Darnell, $3,200. First-year tuition shortfall. Scholarship didn't cover full amount. Told him not to worry. November 2001. Darnell, $7,500. Credit card debt. Interest was stacking. He said he'd pay us back when he got steady. We said okay. June 2004. Darnell and Brittany, $12,000. Deposit on their first apartment together. They were struggling. We helped. February 2008. Darnell, $18,000. Business in trouble. His small landscaping company. He didn't want to ask. Roosevelt called him and offered before he had to. September 2011. Wedding, $9,400. Brittany wanted a large event. Dorothy paid the catering bill herself without telling Roosevelt until after. He didn't say anything, just squeezed her hand. I turned pages slowly. There was more. There was always more with people you love. 2013, car repair. 2014, Simone's medical bills. The bad winter when she had pneumonia. 2015. I stopped at 2015. October 2015, $22,000. Down payment assistance for the house. Darnell said he was buying it from us at market rate. Dorothy made up the difference from the teaching account without telling him. He thinks he paid full price. Let him think that. I closed the notebook. I sat on that floor for a long time. Not because I was calculating. Not because I was building a case. Roosevelt and I had never kept these records as weapons. We kept them the way people keep photographs, because love leaves marks, and marks deserve to be remembered. But what I understood, sitting there on that storage room floor, was something I had been turning away from for years now. There is a difference between being generous and being taken for granted. And the distance between those two things is the distance between being seen and being used. I heard Simone's key in the front door at 3:15, just like always. She was 14, my granddaughter, Darnell's youngest, the one who had gotten Roosevelt's eyes, and as far as I could tell, his sense of when something mattered and when it didn't. She came to the kitchen first, the way she always did, and found me at the table with a cup of tea that had gone cold. Nana, she set her backpack down, looked at me the way she looked at things, straight on, without the sideways glancing that adults use when they're deciding how much to see. You okay? I'm fine, baby. She sat down across from me, did not look at her phone, did not fidget, just sat. I heard them this morning, she said, before school. I looked at her. About Fairview Estates. I wrapped my hands around my cold cup. You don't need to worry about that. I'm not worried, she said. I'm mad. She said it simply, the way 14-year-olds say true things before they learn to dress them up. This is your house, Nana. Grandpa Roosevelt told me. When did he tell you that? Before he died. I was 7. He sat with me on the back steps. You were inside. I think you were on the phone with Aunt Carol. And he said, Simone, this house belongs to your grandmother. Don't ever let anybody forget that. She paused. I never forgot. Roosevelt had said that to a 7-year-old girl, like he was planting something, like he knew. I looked at my granddaughter across that oak table and felt something move in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Not grief, not anger, but something like recognition, like being handed a mirror. Thank you for telling me that, I said. That evening I went to my bedroom, opened the cedar chest at the foot of my bed, and lifted out the sandalwood box Roosevelt had made me the year we finished the house. Inside, his discharge papers from the Army, our wedding photo, the original deed to the property, a small envelope sealed with 6 words written on the front in his handwriting. Open when you need to remember. I had never opened it. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. Then I opened it. The paper inside was folded in thirds, written in blue ink, the letters larger than Roosevelt's usual hand. His eyes had already been giving him trouble by then, though neither of us was saying so out loud. May. If you're reading this, it means you needed reminding. So here it is. You mixed concrete barefoot. You tiled that kitchen 7 months gone with our boy. You drove yourself to school the morning after your mother died because you had 23 kids who needed you there. You stood at my grave. I know you will, May. I know how you stand. And you held yourself up for everyone else the way you always have. Don't let anyone make you small. Not strangers, not neighbors, not our son. The house is yours. You are more than the house. Don't you forget either one. Roosevelt. I folded the letter, placed it back in the sandalwood box, sat very still in the quiet of my room, listening to the house breathe around me the way old houses do, the tick of the walls, the small settling sounds, the particular silence of a place that has held 40 years of living. Then I picked up my phone and found the name I was looking for. Gloria Tanner and I had been friends since 1979, the year we both started teaching Sunday school at New Hope Baptist. We had cried together at Roosevelt's funeral. We had laughed together at every church potluck for 30 years. When her husband Jerome passed in 2014, I sat with her in the hospital for 2 days straight, sleeping in the chair, and she never forgot it. She had become a real estate agent after Jerome died. Because I needed to understand what I owned, she always said, before someone else decided for me. She picked up on the second ring. Gloria, it's Dorothy May. Dorothy. Her voice warmed immediately, then shifted. She had always been able to read me from a single syllable. What's happened? I sat in the back bedroom with the door closed and told her. Not the whole history. There wasn't time for the whole history. Just what mattered. The house, the deed, the conversation that had been delivered to me over my morning coffee like a weather report. What was planned and what was already, quietly, in motion. When I finished, there was a brief silence on her end. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that means someone is taking you seriously. Does Darnell know you're calling me? No. He's going to find out. He will, I said. But by then, everything will already be done. Another pause. Then steady and clear. When do you want to start? I was thinking tomorrow. I'll be there at 10. No signs, no listings. We do this quiet, and we do it right. That's exactly what I need. I hung up and sat for a moment in the stillness of the room. Through the wall, I could hear the faint sound of Brittany's television, one of those home renovation programs she favored, where people tore apart perfectly good rooms and replaced everything with white. I looked around at the walls of the bedroom Roosevelt and I had shared for 28 years. The paint was the original color, a soft, warm ivory I had chosen myself from a strip of samples pinned to the hardware store wall. The curtains were the ones I had sewn from fabric I found at an estate sale the year Darnell started middle school. Every surface in this house had a story. Every choice had a hand behind it, mine or Roosevelt's or both of ours together. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of putting it into the hands of people who would understand that. But tonight, I walked down the hall to the kitchen, ran my fingers along the blue and white tiles on the wall, each one slightly uneven, each one placed by my hands in the summer of 1983. And I stood there in the quiet of my own home for a long time. The house is yours. Yes, Roosevelt, I know. The next morning I dressed before anyone else was up, put on the navy blue blazer he had given me for our 25th anniversary. That color suits you, May. It's the color of a woman who knows where she stands, and brewed a pot of coffee in the kitchen that had always been mine. Darnell came through at 7:30, phone to his ear, jacket half on. He nodded at me, the way you nod at someone when you have reduced them to furniture, and walked out the front door. Brittany followed 10 minutes later, yoga mat under one arm, not looking up from her phone. The house went quiet. At exactly 10 o'clock, Gloria Tanner came up the front walk in her serious blue blazer with her leather folder tucked under one arm, moving like a woman with somewhere to be, and the confidence to take her time getting there. I opened the door before she could knock. "Let's do this right," she said. We sat at Roosevelt's oak table with the morning light on the papers between us, and we began. Gloria spread the documents across Roosevelt's table like she was laying out a hand of cards she already knew how to play. Preliminary valuation, disclosure forms, agency agreement. Her reading glasses sat low on her nose, and she moved through each page with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had been doing this long enough to know which details mattered and which ones were just paper filling space. Her assistant, a young woman named Keisha, maybe 26, with natural hair pinned up and a camera bag over one shoulder, moved through the rooms without being told twice. She didn't rush. She didn't make noise. She understood without being asked that this was not an ordinary showing. I heard her pause in the kitchen. A moment later, she appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Washington, these tiles." She was looking at the blue and white wall beside the stove. "Who did these?" "I did. 1983. 7 months pregnant." Keisha lowered her camera slowly and looked at me the way young people look at older women when they suddenly understand something they didn't before. "I'm going to make sure these photographs are right," she said. "I mean really right." "I'd appreciate that." Gloria looked up from her papers and caught my eye across the table. Said nothing. Just turned the page. The preliminary valuation she set in front of me made me sit back in my chair. $485,000, I said. Possibly more, depending on offers. The neighborhood has moved significantly in the last 3 years. 34% appreciation. And Dorothy, she tapped the page. This house has something new construction doesn't have and can't manufacture. It has character. Buyers who understand what they're looking for will pay for that. I looked at the number again. Roosevelt and I had paid $48,000 for the land and materials in 1981. We had built most of it ourselves over 2 years. We had scrimped and bartered and eaten a lot of beans so that we could put every spare dollar into the walls around us. $485,000. No signs, I said. No online listings. No open houses. Agreed. I have a contact list, people who are actively looking, who have financing in place, who aren't interested in tearing things down and starting over. I'll reach out directly. Discreet showings only. And Darnell? Gloria folded her hands on the table. He'll find out when it's done. That's what I need. We signed the listing agreement at 10:47 in the morning. I initialed every page carefully, in the same steady hand I had used for 32 years of report cards and permission slips and the letters I wrote to parents who needed to hear hard truths gently delivered. Keisha packed her camera equipment in the hallway just as Darnell's voice came booming from the den, where he had apparently returned from wherever he'd gone and set himself up for a video call, headphones on, completely unaware of what was happening 20 feet away. Gloria glanced toward the sound, raised an eyebrow at me. He came back about an hour ago, I said quietly. Headphones, Zoom meeting. He won't surface for another 2 hours at least. She allowed herself a small smile. Convenient. Providence, I said. After Gloria and Keisha left, I stood at the front window and watched the car pull away from the curb. The street was quiet. A woman walked past with a stroller. 2 boys on bicycles cut around the corner. Ordinary Tuesday morning, ordinary world, while inside this house everything had just shifted on its axis. I went back to the kitchen, washed the coffee cups, dried them, put them away. Then I opened the drawer beside the refrigerator and pulled out a small red notebook with a cracked spine, the one I used for grocery lists and reminders, and the occasional thought that needed somewhere to land. I turned to a clean page and wrote, Bank appointment. Bring deed and trust documents. Call Linda Okafor. Gloria. Confirm buyer timeline. Begin packing the things that matter. Leave the rest. Each line felt like a brick being laid. Not to build a wall, to build a road. There was something else I needed to do. Something I had been putting off since the morning after Darnell's announcement, when the thought had come to me in the dark, and I had tucked it away to examine later. I waited until the following afternoon, when the house was empty, and called Linda Okafor. Linda had been the branch manager at First Community Trust since 2007. She had helped Roosevelt and me refinance during the hard years, had processed the final mortgage payment without charging us the standard fee. Consider it a graduation gift, she'd said, and had kept her counsel through 17 years of knowing more about our financial life than anyone outside the marriage. She answered on the first ring. Dorothy Washington, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. You got the notification from Gloria's office. Came through this morning. A pause. How are you? I'm clear, I said, which is different from fine, but better. It is, she agreed. What do you need? I need to set up a living trust, today if possible, and I need it airtight. There was a brief silence. Not surprise. Linda didn't do surprise. More like the sound of someone shifting gears smoothly. How much discretion? Enough that no one can get curious without my explicit authorization. Come in at 2 o'clock. I'll have the forms ready. I arrived at the bank in the navy blazer. Linda met me at the door of her office herself, which she only did for people she respected, and we spent the next 90 minutes going through every document with the kind of careful attention that I imagine surgeons give to things they cannot afford to get wrong. I designated myself primary beneficiary and trustee, full control, full authority, for as long as I was living and capable, which was going to be for quite some time, regardless of what Brittany thought about my stage of life. Then Linda slid the secondary beneficiary form across the desk. I wrote Simone's name without hesitating. Linda looked at the form, looked at me. Not Darnell? Simone, I said. She's the one who still sees me. Linda nodded once and made a note. Then she set down her pen and folded her hands, the gesture that meant she was about to say something that wasn't on any form. Dorothy, there's something you should know. She paused. 3 months ago, a law firm contacted this branch requesting financial information on your accounts. They identified themselves as representing a family member. I went very still. I declined to provide anything. No authorization on file, no information given. But I thought you should know it happened. The room was quiet for a moment. Outside Linda's glass office wall, the ordinary sounds of a bank continued. Keyboards, low voices, the soft chime of the door. Which firm? I asked. She slid a business card across the desk. I looked at it. Did not recognize the name, but recognized the nature of the thing. Someone had been planning this before I had. Darnell, who had stood in my kitchen 2 weeks ago and talked about needing more space and wanting what was best for me, while a lawyer was already making inquiries on his behalf. Not out of concern, out of strategy. I set the card down, took one steady breath. Then I looked at Linda. Add a clause to the trust, I said. If there is any legal challenge from any family member, any attempt to contest or dispute, the full value transfers automatically to an educational scholarship fund, named for Roosevelt Washington, to be administered through Jefferson Elementary, where I taught. Linda looked at me for a long moment. That's a significant deterrent. That's the point. She picked up her pen. I'll have the revised language ready for your signature by end of day. On the way out, I stopped in the parking lot and stood beside my car for a moment in the afternoon sun. The air smelled like cut grass and a little like rain coming. I thought about Darnell in that lawyer's office, mapping out contingencies, arranging pieces on a board. I thought about Brittany researching Fairview Estates, printing brochures, building a case. They had been so certain I would go quietly. They had spent years learning that lesson from me, because I had spent years teaching it by example, making things easier, smoothing things over, stepping back so others could step forward. I had thought that was love, and part of it was, but somewhere along the way, love had curdled into expectation, and expectation into entitlement. And now my son was consulting attorneys about my assets while I was still living in the house I had built with my bare hands. I got in the car, drove home, made dinner as usual, roasted chicken, green beans, rice. Set 3 places at the table. Nobody said thank you. Nobody said much of anything. I washed the dishes after and went to bed early. The Holloways came on a Thursday. Gloria had called the night before. I have a couple I think you should meet. Late 50s, both recently retired. He was a history teacher for 30 years. She was a nurse. They're not looking for an investment. They're looking for a home. Bring them, I said. I made banana bread that morning. Not to impress. I was long past performing for people. But because the smell of it baking meant something to me, and I wanted whoever walked through that door to understand immediately what kind of place this was. Raymond Holloway was 61, with silver at his temples, and the unhurried manner of a man who had spent decades in classrooms and learned the value of not rushing toward conclusions. Cynthia Holloway was 58, brown-skinned, with kind eyes and the particular stillness of someone who had worked night shifts in hospital wards and knew how to be present in a room without filling it up unnecessarily. They did not walk through the house the way most buyers walk through houses, opening closets, measuring walls with their eyes, calculating renovations. They moved through it the way you move through a place you're trying to understand. Raymond stopped in the living room and looked up at the ceiling, then down at the floor. "How old is this hardwood?" he asked. "Original. Roosevelt laid it in 1983. White oak." He crouched down and ran a hand along the grain, the way you'd touch something that had earned its age. "Old wood is better," he said, almost to himself. "It knows how to stand." Cynthia had drifted to the kitchen. I found her standing at the east window looking out at the yard, one hand resting on the sill. "The morning light in here," she said quietly. 7:30, every day. I've sat at that table for 30 years watching it come in. She turned and looked at me. Really looked. The way nurses do, the way teachers do, the way people look when they've spent their working lives learning to see past what people show on the surface. "You love this house," she said. "I do. I always will." "Then why are you selling it?" It was a direct question and it deserved a direct answer. "Because it's mine," I said. "And I want it to go to people who will understand what that means." She held my gaze for a moment. Then she nodded, a slow, considered nod, the kind that means I hear you, and I'm not going to pretend I don't. We sat in the living room after the tour. I served banana bread on the blue plates I kept for company and poured tea into the good cups. We talked, not as buyer and seller, but as people who had all lived long enough to know that houses are never just houses. Raymond asked about the tiles in the kitchen. I told him. He asked about the oak table. I told him that too. Cynthia asked about the garden, what had grown there, what might again. When Gloria walked them to the door, she turned and caught my eye across the room. She gave me one small nod. They wanted to offer full asking price. That evening, while Darnell was on another call and Brittany was watching television, I went to the storage room and began. Not packing everything, that would come later, but choosing. There is a particular kind of clarity that arrives when you are deciding what to carry forward and what to leave behind. You learn very quickly what actually matters and what was just taking up space. Roosevelt's fishing journal, my mother's recipe cards, written in her looping, impatient handwriting, the quilt from my grandmother, the one made of patches from dresses she had worn as a girl in Alabama, the sandalwood box, a photograph of Darnell at age 5, gap-toothed and squinting into the sun, both arms wrapped around my leg like I was the only solid thing in the world. I wrapped that one carefully and labeled the box, handle gently. I was on my knees reaching for something on the back shelf when I heard the door open behind me. Simone. She stood in the doorway of the storage room, backpack still on, looking at the boxes I had begun to gather. "Nana," her voice was careful. "Are you packing?" "A little." She came in and sat cross-legged on the floor beside me, the way she used to sit when she was small and wanted to be near whatever I was doing. "Nana, the house sold, didn't it?" It wasn't a question. I stopped what I was doing and looked at her. "How do you know that?" She pulled out her phone, showed me the screen. A transaction confirmation email, automatically sent to the household address, which Simone, being 14 and therefore 17 steps ahead of every adult in her vicinity, had set up to forward to her personal account years ago. "I read it 3 days ago," she said. "You didn't tell your parents." "You weren't telling them," which meant you had a reason. She looked at me steadily. "Do you?" "Yes." She nodded. Accepted that completely. "Where are you going?" "A small house on Maple Street, near the library, near the park, near enough. Can I come visit?" My door will always be open for you. That is not a thing that will ever change." She looked around the storage room, the boxes, the old notebooks, the years of accumulated careful living. Then she did something that I was not prepared for. She set her backpack down, rolled up her sleeves, and picked up a roll of packing tape. "What goes in this box?" she asked. I looked at my granddaughter. Roosevelt's eyes, Roosevelt's steadiness, Roosevelt's way of deciding that a thing needed doing and then simply doing it, and I had to turn away for a moment before I could answer. "The kitchen things," I said when I could speak evenly. "Start with those." We worked side by side for an hour without saying much. The house was quiet around us, and in that quiet, I understood something I had perhaps always known but never said out loud. This was not a loss. This was a beginning. I left on a Friday morning. Darnell was in Atlanta for a conference. Brittany had gone to her gym at 6, as always, and would not be back until mid-morning. Simone was at school. The house was mine one last time, entirely and without interruption, the way it had been in the very beginning. I walked through it slowly, room by room. Not to grieve. I had already done whatever grieving needed doing quietly over many nights. I walked through it to remember, to let every room confirm what I already knew, that I had been here, that I had built this, that this place carried the mark of my hands and my choices in every surface. The kitchen tiles, the oak floor, the growth chart in the hallway where I had penciled Darnell's height each year until he was 8 and refused to stand still for it anymore. The mark still there under the beige paint Brittany had rolled over everything, faint but present, like something that cannot quite be covered up. I stood at Roosevelt's table one last time, put both palms flat on the wood. "Thank you," I said, to the table, to the house, to Roosevelt, to the 38-year-old woman who had mixed concrete barefoot and did not think twice about it. Then I picked up my bags. On the table, I left one envelope, Darnell's name on the front in my steadiest handwriting. Inside, the completed sale documents, Gloria's contact information, and a single index card with 7 words written in blue ink. This house was always mine. Dorothy. No explanation, no apology, no invitation to discuss. The taxi was at the curb. The driver, an older man named Walter, who said nothing and loaded my boxes without being asked, had the manner of someone who had seen many kinds of departures and understood that most of them did not require comment. I locked the front door for the last time, stood on the porch for exactly 1 moment, feeling the boards under my feet, the boards that creaked in the particular way they always had. The way Roosevelt used to say meant the house knew your step. Then I walked down to the taxi, got in, and did not look back. Not once. Some things deserve your eyes forward. At 2:47 that afternoon, my phone rang. Darnell. I watched his name light up the screen and did not answer. He called again at 2:51, 2:54, 3:09. By 3:22, the messages had begun, each one a step further up the ladder of a panic I had expected and felt nothing particular about. "Mom, what's going on? Call me. Mom, I'm looking at paperwork here. What is this? Call me right now. I don't understand this. We had plans. You should have told us. Why would you do this without telling us?" Then Brittany. "This is vindictive and you know it. We were trying to help you." I read each message once. Then I set the phone face down on the nightstand of the small inn on Route 9 where I had checked in under my maiden name, Dorothy Mae Grant, the name that had belonged only to me before I gave it willingly to Roosevelt and built a life around the new one. The room was simple. 1 bed, a desk, curtains the color of weak tea, a window that looked out onto an ordinary parking lot, and beyond it, a gas station and a strip of trees turning color in the October air. I unpacked nothing. Just set my suitcase in the corner, placed my Bible on the nightstand beside the phone, and sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet. The first night, I slept 9 hours straight. No dreams, no waking at 2 a.m. to the sound of someone else's footsteps, no lying still in the dark, waiting for a house that had once been mine to remember that it still was. Just sleep, deep and clean and entirely my own. The cottage on Maple Street was smaller than I remembered. The first time I had seen it was 15 years ago. On a Sunday afternoon drive Roosevelt and I used to take when the weather was good, and neither of us had anywhere particular to be. We had slowed down in front of it without meaning to. A small cream-colored bungalow set back from the street behind a row of old boxwoods, 1 story, a covered porch with a swing that needed painting, A side yard with a dogwood tree that was doing exactly what dogwood trees do in October, which is turn a color that has no proper name but sits somewhere between copper and fire. Roosevelt had said, "Now that's a house that knows what it is." I had agreed. We had driven on. Life had continued. Now I stood on that same porch with 2 suitcases and 3 boxes, and the woman who owned it, Margaret, a retired pediatric nurse with white hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, handed me a key on a plain silver ring and said, "Take all the time you need settling in. This place has been waiting for the right person." I didn't know exactly what she meant, but I chose to receive it as something true. The kitchen faced east. The morning light came in at 7:30. Margaret had told me that when we first spoke on the phone, and I had written it down in my red notebook the way I used to write down things my students said when they surprised me, carefully, so I wouldn't lose it. The first morning I woke before 6, made coffee in an unfamiliar kitchen with my own familiar hands, and carried the cup to the chair I had placed by the east window the night before. I sat. I waited. At 7:28, the light began. By 7:30 it was fully there. That particular gold, that specific angle, warming the floor tiles and the edge of the table and the side of my face the way light does when it has found exactly where it belongs. I sat in it for a long time without moving. Roosevelt would have said something about it. Something quiet and precise that would have made me laugh and also made me feel like the most seen person in any room. He had that gift of making ordinary moments feel like they had been specifically arranged for your benefit. I lifted my coffee cup toward the light. "I found it," I said. Darnell called 7 times the first day, 8 times the second. On the third day, the calls slowed to 3, and the messages shifted in tone. Less frantic, more careful, the way a person's voice changes when the panic has burned through, and what's left is something rawer and less certain of itself. "Mom." I went by the house. "Raymond and Cynthia seem like good people. I don't understand why you didn't tell me. Please call me back." I read the message twice, put the phone down, made myself a proper breakfast, eggs, toast, half a grapefruit, and ate it at my table in my kitchen in my light. I was not punishing him with the silence. I want to be clear about that, at least to myself. I was not sitting in that cottage savoring his discomfort the way you savor a thing you have been waiting a long time for. That was not what this was. What this was rest. For the first time in years, possibly the first time since Roosevelt died, and I had made the mistake of trying to fold myself into the shape of someone else's household, I was not managing anyone's feelings but my own. I was not reading the temperature of a room before I entered it. I was not adjusting my volume, my schedule, my appetite, my presence to accommodate the preferences of people who had long since stopped accommodating mine. I was simply living, and that took some getting used to. On the 4th day, Linda Okafor called. "The funds cleared this morning," she said. "Everything has been recorded. The trust is fully established." I was standing in the side yard at the time, looking at the dogwood tree. Up close, the color was even better than I remembered. That copper fire mixture, with light coming through the leaves from behind. "And Simone's designation?" I asked. "Everything exactly as we discussed. Ironclad." A pause. "Dorothy, there's something else." "Go ahead." "Darnell's attorney contacted our office yesterday, making inquiries about potential grounds for contesting the sale." Her voice was steady and professional, but I heard the care beneath it. "I want you to know that I referred them immediately to your attorney and provided nothing." I looked at the dogwood. A leaf came loose and turned slowly on its way down. "They won't find grounds," I said. "They won't. You were in full legal capacity, the transaction was clean, and the documentation is airtight. But I wanted you to hear it from me directly." "Thank you, Linda. There's one more thing. The trust document, the clause regarding challenges." "Yes. His attorney has seen it. Gloria's office forwarded the relevant section as a matter of disclosure." A brief silence. "We haven't heard from them since." I smiled at the dogwood tree. Roosevelt had always said that the best defense was the kind that didn't require you to raise your voice. "Good," I said. I joined the Thursday book circle at the public library in my 3rd week on Maple Street. Not because I needed books recommended to me. I had been reading seriously and widely since I was 7 years old, and I had opinions about literature that could fill several evenings on their own. I joined because I wanted to sit in a room with people who were interested in something beyond their own immediate circumstances, and I wanted to practice the particular pleasure of listening without agenda. The group was 8 women and 1 man, ranging from 54 to 81. The man, a retired architect named Howard who wore bow ties and had strong feelings about Toni Morrison, turned out to be the best reader in the group, which surprised no one more than himself. The woman who ran it, Patricia, was 67, recently widowed, and had the manner of someone who had decided that the second half of her life was going to be conducted entirely on her own terms. We recognized something in each other immediately, the way women of a certain age and a certain experience sometimes do. "First time?" she asked, handing me a cup of tea before the session started. "First time here, not first time reading," she laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from the belly. "Good. We don't need beginners. We need people with opinions." "I have several," I said. "Perfect. Sit next to me." I did, and I went back the following Thursday, and the one after that. It came in the mail on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after I had settled into the cottage. A padded envelope, the return address, the offices of New Hope Baptist Church, Pastor Elwood Freeman. Inside, a note in his handwriting on church stationery. "Dorothy, Roosevelt gave me this to hold for you in January 2010, 1 month before he passed. He told me, 'Give it to her when you know she needs it most.' I have been holding it for 14 years. I believe this is the moment. Pastor Freeman." Beneath the note was an envelope, old, slightly yellowed at the edges, sealed. Roosevelt's handwriting on the front. "For May, when the time is right." I took it to the porch, sat in the swing. The October air was cool and smelled of wood smoke from somewhere down the street. I held the envelope in both hands for a moment. Then I opened it. 4 pages, written in blue ink, the letters larger than Roosevelt's usual careful script. His eyes had been failing him by then, though he had not said so, and I had not pushed, and we had carried that particular unspoken thing between us the way long marriages carry things, carefully, with both hands. It was not a love letter. Or rather, it was not only a love letter, it was a record. He had written down everything, every financial decision, every reason, every choice made over 40 years that he had never fully explained because he had not wanted to burden me with his worrying. Why the house was in my name only. Why he had opened the separate savings account in 1995. Why he had never added Darnell to the property deed, even when Darnell had asked directly, twice, in 2007 and again in 2012. I told him it was complicated. It wasn't complicated. I just knew. A father knows his child the way you know a house you built yourself. Every strength, every weakness, every place where the load might be too much someday. I love our son, but I did not trust him with your security. That is not a judgment. It is just the truth, and you deserve the truth. I kept your name on everything because you are the one I trusted completely. Not because Darnell is bad, because you are unshakable. There is a difference. May, I have watched you your whole life, or the part of it I was lucky enough to share, and I want you to know that I have never once seen you do anything small, even when you thought you were, even when no one was watching. There was nothing small about the way you lived. If someone is trying to make you feel small right now, I need you to remember, they are working against 40 years of evidence. The house is yours. You are more than the house. I love you. I am proud of you. I am not worried about you. Roosevelt, I sat on that porch swing in the October afternoon for a very long time. A neighbor walked by with a dog. Waved. I waved back. The swing moved slightly in the breeze. Eventually, quietly, privately, with no one to see and no reason to perform anything for anyone, I cried. Not the kind of tears that come from grief or self-pity. The kind that come when you have been carrying something heavy for a long time and someone reaches out and takes half the weight, even from across 14 years and whatever comes after death, and you feel the difference in your body before you feel it anywhere else. I cried until I was done. Then I folded the letter, placed it in the sandalwood box beside the original, and went inside to make dinner. Elaine and Raymond Holloway had agreed, through Gloria, to allow me one final private morning in the house before they moved in. I had asked for it, and they had said yes without hesitation. "Of course," Cynthia had said over the phone, in the voice of someone who understood immediately why it mattered. I arrived just after dawn, walking up the front path in the early light. The garden was still there, overgrown in places, patient in others. The dogwood in the side yard, The rose bushes Roosevelt had planted the first spring, long since gone wild, but still, against all odds, producing small red blooms in their season. The door was unlocked as promised. Inside, the house was empty, all of their furniture already removed, all of mine already gone. Just walls and floors and light coming through windows, and the particular silence of a house that has been emptied of its people, but not yet of its memory. I had not known Darnell would be there. He was sitting on this floor of the living room when I came in, the way children sit when they have exhausted their options and their pride along with them. Back against the wall, knees drawn up, arms resting across them. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. "Mom!" He stood too quickly, a man trying to recover his footing. I walked past him into the kitchen. He followed. We stood in that kitchen, the one I had tiled 7 months pregnant, the one where I had made 40 years of breakfasts and dinners and Sunday morning waffles and birthday cakes for a boy who had grown into a man who had looked at me across this very room and told me it was time I moved on. And I let the silence settle between us before I spoke. "You came back," I said. "I needed to—" He stopped, started again. "I didn't know what else to do." "That's honest?" He looked at the blue and white tiles. At the place where Roosevelt's table had stood for 37 years, now marked only by 4 faint impressions in the oak floor. "Mom, I need you to understand. Darnell," my voice was not loud. "It has never needed to be. You don't need me to understand anything right now. You need to listen." He closed his mouth. "I raised you in this house," I said. "I kept it running on a teacher's salary and your father's electrician's wages and a lot of years of very careful living. I drove you to baseball practice and choir rehearsal and the emergency room that time you fell out of the oak tree and swore you hadn't been climbing it. I paid for your braces when the insurance denied the claim. I wrote the check for your first year of college. I have the records, Darnell. Your father kept records of everything, and I read every page of them, and not once in 40 years of giving, did I keep score to use against you." He was very still. "So when you sat at your father's table, the table he built with his hands, and told me it was time I found somewhere more suitable, you need to understand what you were asking me to walk away from. Not just a house, yourself. Every version of yourself that this house remembers." Something moved in his face, shifted. The careful composure he had walked in with was coming apart at the edges, and he was letting it, which was more than I had expected. "I know," he said, quietly, barely above a whisper. "Do you?" He pressed his lips together. "I've been talking to Pastor Freeman. That surprised me. I did not show it, but it did. He didn't judge me," Darnell continued. "He just asked me one question. He said, 'When was the last time you asked your mother how she was feeling?' And He stopped. I couldn't answer him. The kitchen was very quiet around us. "I found the notebooks," he said. "Ba's notebooks. I took them from the storage room before the Holloways moved in. I read everything." He looked up at me. "I didn't know, Mom. About the down payment. About what you covered. About all of it." "You didn't know because you didn't ask," I said. "And we didn't tell you because we didn't need you to thank us. We needed you to see us. There's a difference." His jaw tightened. He was working against something. Pride, probably. That stubborn pride that had always been the thing most likely to cost him. "I was wrong," he said finally. The 3 words landed like something that had been held a long time and was finally set down. "About the house. About how I talked to you. About what I let Brittany—" He stopped, steadied himself. "I was wrong." I looked at my son, 41 years old, standing in the kitchen of his childhood with the marks of his decisions visible on his face and his posture. I thought about the boy who had sat at that oak table with sticky fingers and a gap-toothed grin and absolute confidence that I would always be there. He had not been wrong about that last part. I am still here. I just moved. "I know you were wrong," I said. "And I know you know it. That's a starting place, Darnell. It's not an ending and it's not enough on its own, but it's a place to start from. What do I do now?" "You go home. You be a better father than you were a son this past year. You let Simone see what it looks like when a man admits a mistake and means it." I picked up my bag. "And you call me on Sundays. Not because you need something, just because I'm your mother." He nodded. His eyes were wet. He didn't try to hide it, which was the first genuinely surprising thing he had done in years. I walked past him, down the hall to the front door, stopped with my hand on the frame. Darnell, yeah, your father was proud of you, even when he was worried about you. He held both of those things at the same time because that's what love actually looks like. I paused. I do too. I left before he could respond. Some things are better received in silence. She called on a Saturday 3 weeks later and asked if she could come over. Not can I come? The way teenagers ask when they already have a ride arranged and are really just notifying you, she asked, with the particular formality she sometimes used when something mattered to her and she wanted to make sure it was handled correctly. Of course you can, I said. Come for breakfast. She arrived at 9 with a tin of my favorite tea from the shop downtown. She had remembered from some conversation 6 months ago that I hadn't known she was paying attention to, and a notebook she held against her chest like something valuable. Nana, she said, stepping inside and looking around the cottage with Roosevelt's eyes, taking it all in. It's good. It is, I agreed. Come in the kitchen. She sat at the table while I got things out, and then she said, Will you teach me to make biscuits? Real ones, from the beginning. From your great-grandmother's recipe? From wherever they started. So that is what we did. I talked her through it the way my mother had talked me through it, not measuring everything with scientific precision, but learning what the dough felt like, learning to trust your hands. Simone listened with her whole body, the way she had always listened, and she asked good questions, and she made the same mistakes I had made the first time, and the second, and eventually the biscuits came out of the oven golden and slightly uneven and exactly right. We ate them at the table with butter and honey, and the morning light coming in at its appointed angle. Nana, Simone said, pinching off a piece of biscuit, if Dad asked you to come back, if things were different, would you? I considered this seriously, the way the question deserved. No, I said. She nodded slowly. Not hurt, just listening. Not because I don't love your father, not because I don't love all of you. I set down my cup. But because I found something here that I didn't know I was missing. I found out what it feels like to live in a place that's fully mine, the quiet of it, the peace of it, and I'm not willing to trade that away again. Does that make sense? Yeah, she said. Then, are you lonely? Being alone and being lonely aren't the same thing. I looked at my granddaughter across the table. I spent years surrounded by people and lonelier than I am right now. Now I'm alone, and I'm not lonely at all. There's a difference. She thought about this, ate another piece of biscuit. I want to learn everything you know how to make, she said. All the recipes, all of it. That will take years. Good, she smiled. Roosevelt's smile, that unhurried, settled smile. I've got years. After she left, I went to my bedroom and took the sealed envelope from the drawer, the one with her name on the front, written weeks ago, waiting for the right moment. I sat at the small desk by the window, opened it, read what I had written. Then I took a pen and added a final note at the bottom of the last page, beneath everything else. Simone, one more thing. When you are old enough to understand what it cost and what it was worth, I want you to know this. I did not sell that house out of anger. I sold it because it was mine, and I needed to remember that. Because remembering what belongs to you, truly belongs to you, not just on paper but in the marrow of you, is not selfishness. It is survival. And sometimes survival is the most loving thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for every woman who comes after you who is watching how you stand. You come from women who stood. Now you know how. All my love. Always. Nana Dorothy. I sealed the envelope again. Put it back in the drawer. Not yet, but soon enough. It arrived on a Wednesday, 6 weeks after the morning in the empty kitchen. A plain white envelope in the mailbox. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting from 30 years of birthday cards and Christmas notes and the occasional letter from college that had always surprised me with how much of Roosevelt was already in him, even then. I took it to the back porch. The dogwood in the side yard had lost most of its leaves by now, but the bones of it were good. You could see the structure clearly, the way a tree reveals its real shape when the decoration is gone. I opened the envelope. 2 pages. His handwriting. No salutations, no formal opening, just words, the way words come when someone has stopped rehearsing and started saying the actual thing. Mom, I talked to Pastor Freeman 3 more times. He still hasn't judged me. I'm starting to think that might be worse. I went back to the house. Raymond let me in. He showed me around like it was already theirs, which it is, and he wasn't unkind about it. He told me that you had asked them not to change the kitchen tiles. He said you called them a signature. I stood in that kitchen and looked at those tiles for a long time. I remember watching you lay those. I was 3, maybe 4. You sat me on the counter with a biscuit to keep me occupied, and you worked in sections, humming something I never identified. I'd forgotten that. I forgot it so completely that when I looked at those tiles as an adult, I just saw tiles. I didn't see you in them at all. I've been thinking about what it means to stop seeing someone. Not to dislike them or resent them, just to stop seeing them. To look directly at a person and see only what's useful or inconvenient about their presence. I did that to you. I don't have a good reason for it. I'm not going to construct one. I found out about the legal inquiry. My attorney told me because I asked him directly. He confirmed that he had made inquiries about your assets 3 months before the conversation about Fairview, before any of it. Brittany had asked him to look into it. I didn't know. That's not an excuse. I should have known. I should have asked. I should have been paying attention to what was happening in my own house. I've told him to close everything. There's nothing to contest, and I wouldn't contest it if there were. I don't know how to make up for what the last few years have been. Maybe I can't make it up. Maybe that's not the right framework. Maybe what I can do is just be different going forward and let that speak for itself over time. Simone told me you taught her to make biscuits. She made them last Sunday. They were good. She was proud. I'd like to come by sometime if you'd allow it. Not to ask for anything. Not to relitigate what happened. Just to sit at your table and drink your coffee and be your son. If that's too much, I understand. I'll wait. Love, Darnell. I read the letter twice, sat with it for a long time on the back porch while the afternoon moved through the yard in its unhurried way. He had found out about the attorney. He had confronted it directly rather than burying it. He had not tried to explain it away. That was something. That was more than something. I thought about Roosevelt's letter. I did not trust him with your security. That is not a judgment. It is just the truth. And I thought about what it might mean that the man Roosevelt had written those words about had, at 41 years old, with everything stripped away, sat down and found his way to honesty. People surprised you. Not always, not often enough, but sometimes. I went inside, made tea, sat at my kitchen table in my kitchen in my light, and thought for a while. Then I picked up the phone. It rang twice before he answered. His voice careful, cautious, like a man who had learned recently that caution was warranted. Mom? Sunday, I said. Dad. Come at 9. I'll make breakfast. A silence. Then very quietly. Yeah, okay. I'll be there. Darnell. Yeah. Bring Simone. I heard something release in the sound he made then. Not quite a word. Something underneath words. The sound of a person setting something down that they have been carrying too long. We'll be there, he said. I hung up. Sat quietly for a moment in the kitchen that was entirely mine. Then I got up, opened the recipe box, and began pulling out the cards I would need. 6 months on Maple Street. The dogwood has come back into bud. The jasmine that grows wild along the back fence, planted by no one, belonging to itself, has begun to climb again. And on warm mornings the kitchen smells of it if I leave the window open, which I always do now. Darnell comes on Sundays. He calls first, always. He arrives with something, flowers sometimes, or a bag of the good coffee I like, or once, memorably, a clay pot Simone had made in her art class and painted blue and white in the colors of the kitchen tiles. For your herbs, Simone had written on the card tucked inside. Since you had to leave the ones that were growing, I keep it on the kitchen windowsill. There is rosemary in it now, and a little thyme. They are doing well. Brittany has not called. I do not expect she will, and I have made my peace with that in the particular way you make peace with things that cannot be changed. Not by pretending they don't matter, but by deciding that your life is large enough to continue without them. Not every door that closes needs to be reopened. Some of them close because they were never the right door to begin with. The Thursday Book Circle continues. Howard the architect brought in a selection of essays last month that provoked a 40-minute debate that ended in laughter and nobody agreeing about anything, which Patricia declared the most successful session of the year. I have started writing. Nothing formal, just the recipes. My grandmother's, my mother's, my own. Written out in a new notebook in handwriting large enough to read comfortably, organized by season, annotated with the kind of notes that matter. Use real butter, don't rush the roux. The biscuits will tell you when they're ready if you know how to listen. Simone says she wants to cook through the whole book before she leaves for college. That gives you 4 years, I told her. Then we better start. We do, most Saturdays. She cracks the eggs too hard and spills things and asks questions that cut straight to the center of whatever I'm trying to teach. And she has Roosevelt's gift for silence when silence is what a thing needs. She is going to be extraordinary. She already is. On the last Sunday of October, I woke early and sat with my coffee in the east light and opened the sandalwood box. Roosevelt's letter, my grandmother's photograph, the original deed to the house on Whitmore Drive, now belonging to Raymond and Cynthia Holloway, who have, according to Gloria, been seen on the front porch most evenings with their own cups of something warm, watching the street in the particular unhurried way of people who have found a place to belong. I held Roosevelt's letter for a moment. Did not read it. I know it now the way I know hymns, without needing the page. I thought about what he had written at the end. I am not worried about you. You were right, I said to the kitchen, to the morning light, to whatever remains of a man who spent his life building things meant to last. You were right not to worry. I put the letter back in the box, closed the lid, poured myself a second cup of coffee. Outside, the jasmine was moving in a small morning wind. A neighbor I now knew by name, Doris, who grew tomatoes and had opinions about everything, and was exactly the kind of neighbor I had always deserved, walked past with her dog and raised a hand in greeting. I raised mine back. Inside, the house breathed quietly around me. No footsteps I had not chosen, no silences I had not made, no spaces I had to negotiate or apologize for or make myself smaller to fit. Just room, just light, just the particular freedom of a life that belongs, finally and entirely, to the woman living it. I opened my recipe notebook to a fresh page, picked up my pen, and began.